Hello, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. Probably good morning for some people. I'm happy you could join us today. I would like to thank Harun for inviting me to speak about Kenyan women's participation in politics. And I would like to apologize for not being able to make it in person due to unforeseen circumstances. I am hoping that this video will make a decent substitute for my being here in person. In case you have any further questions, please do not hesitate to share them with Harun, who will forward them to me, and I will be happy to reply. I would like to start by first disclaiming the breadth of the topic. I think Harun says Kenyan women in politics, governance, democracy, and public spaces. And I think for me, that was quite broad. And I decided to focus specifically on women in politics and kind of stay away from the topic of governance, democracy, and public spaces for this conversation. I'll start by first generally addressing the question of why do we need women in politics? Several studies have shown that women have a positive impact on politics. The National Democratic Institute found that women tend to, first, work across party lines, second, be highly responsive to constituent concerns, third, help to secure lasting peace, fourth, encourage citizen confidence in democracy through their own participation, and fifth, prioritize health, education, and other key development indicators. To quote Kofi Annan, study after study has taught us that there is no tool for development more effective than the empowerment of women. The belief that women's engagement in politics has a positive impact on politics has led to the creation of a number of international conventions and legal frameworks designed to guarantee women's political rights. Sadly, the world remains far behind from achieving gender parity in politics. Let's now go to Kenya, and specifically elections 2022. And I divided my points specifically in three parts: what's good, what could be better, and what needs to be different. So let's start with the good news. The good news is the numbers are mixed. The first time a woman was elected to Kenya's parliament was in 1969. Her name was Grace Onyango, and she was the MP for Kisumu Town constituency. She was also the first woman to serve as a deputy speaker between 1978 and 1984, and she once served as a speaker of parliament while holding the seat of deputy speaker. There's been an increase over time since then. However, the landscape remains predominantly male. In 2022, all the political parties put in place mechanisms to boost the participation of women in the election. Many reduced the nomination fee for women candidates. Some appointed women to key party positions. Despite this, there were less than 2,000 female candidates vying out of a total pool of over 16,000 gazetted aspirants, 12.8% for those who are into percentages. 25 years ago, Kenya had her first female candidate for the office of presidency. Charity Ngilu and Wangari Maathai ran for office in 1997. In 2022, 3 out of the 4 presidential candidates had a woman as running mate. Sadly, we're yet to achieve the goal of having a woman elected either into the office of a president or deputy president to date. After the 2017 election, 21.8% of the national parliamentary seats were held by women. This was 23 elected women and 47 women reps. In 2022, only 30 women were elected to parliament. So that was an increase of 7 from 23, and they represent 8.6% of the parliament. When you add the 47 seats reserved for women as women reps in parliament, we come to a percentage of 24.8%. That's a 3% increase from 2017, where it was 21.8%. We are still trailing our East African community partner states. Rwanda's parliament is 61.3% female. Uganda's is 33.8% female. In 2017, only 7 out of 21 ministries were headed by women. In the current executive, out of 22 ministries, only 7 are headed by women. The number remains constant, the percentage has decreased. In 2022, 7 women were elected governors. This is an increase from 3 in 2017. And 3 women were elected as senators. This stayed the same as in 2017. So as I said, mixed numbers. What could have been better? Progress to achieve the constitutionally mandated minimum of 33% gender quota is not being made so far. 12 years later, 6 court orders later, Kenya's parliament is yet to pass a law that will mandate the full implementation of Article 27 of the Constitution. What needs to change? Women who vie for elective political positions face verbal sexism, online gender violence, and risk physical attacks. I'm sure if you were following the news before the elections, you read about the increase in attacks on women candidates. You read the disparaging contents they faced, both online and in normal media. It's a very tough world for women who decide to stand for political office in Kenya. It's a very difficult position. It is an acceptance that you will be subject to violence. Probably verbal, sometimes it translates into physical attacks. Women who venture into politics are judged mainly by their outward appearance rather than their substantive contribution and qualifications. So campaign mudslinging tactics employed by their competitors include body shaming, sexist and misogynistic remarks about their marital status, especially if they're single, all kinds of remarks about dress code, about how you look, about how old you are. These are practices that need to change. And patriarchal and women discriminatory language persists. Women candidates tend to face questions about balancing family duties with politics or sexist remarks about appropriate clothing. I think I remember one very specific one about the length of a skirt of a woman leader. Or another one I remember also, I think it was Martha Karua who was asked a question about something and she had to respond that her mother never taught her this. So what we are supposed to be taught by our mothers and how we are supposed to carry ourselves as women continues to be part of a dialogue of what it means to be women leaders. And this actually needs to change. What are my open questions? One of my open questions remains, does numerical representation guarantee the creation of an inclusive political system? In other words, if we have more women, will that change the culture in government? Will that address the unequal distribution of power? I think here I have to borrow some words from my son and say it's a correlation, but it's not a causation. In other words, because of the facts that I gave at the beginning of the talk about women's tendencies when they get into political office, their involvement in politics tends to change the nature of politics in a country. It tends to change the culture of politics in a country. However, you do need a substantial minimum number of women participating, and you do have to hope that there are women who are not going to fall into the existing cultural practices and gender stereotypes. I think right now in Kenya, we are grappling with one situation regarding a woman leader whose leadership practices are being called into question due to some sociocultural influences, is the word I would use. Another open question is whether we will ever achieve the 2/3 gender constitutional threshold. Is it a reality or a dream for Kenya? I am a practical optimist. In other words, I say, yes, we can achieve this. We do need to do some things to do this, but I remain optimistic that this can be done. For those who think or feel that, well, it has taken forever, I'd like to draw them back to the discussion that I am old enough to remember how long it took us to get multi-party constitution in Kenya. I also am old enough to remember how long it took us to actually change the constitution in Kenya. And at every stage in the journey, it looked impossible until it was done. And so as regards the 2/3 gender constitutional threshold, I think it looks impossible until it will be done. There is room, if there is political goodwill, and if the leaders act in the interest of the people, I think there's a possibility that we will achieve it, and then we will wonder what was so difficult about it. But we are still in the stage where we're working it out, and in this stage, everything always looks tough and difficult and impossible. What are the top platforms for Kenyan women in politics? In which spaces can they engage effectively? More and more Kenyan women are engaging in politics on social media, because here they can express themselves and represent themselves and engage directly with their potential voters. We also find that there are more women acting as influencers, as topic leaders, etc., on social media, because they feel comfortable here and they can curate their audiences, they can curate their messaging, and they can manage their communication for themselves without needing an intermediary. There are also efforts by civil society to create women's networking groups, and these are very useful spaces for women to build their capacity, to learn how to engage in the political arena, to raise funds, etc. And so this has been a very useful space for women engaging in politics in Kenya. Are there policies that can be created to ensure the inclusion of women in politics? Here, I would echo the recommendations Kipra has very recently made. One of them is to encourage the Office of the Registrar of Political Parties to consider the establishment of policies that incentivize political parties to support women candidates in the electoral process. The Office of the Registrar of Political Parties is responsible for determining public funding to political parties. And here, I think there is room to very positively impact the number of women engaging in politics by influencing the funding process to ensure that it has a gender lens. Civil society efforts to create independent funds also support capacity building in this field. This involves training of women who want to stand for office, building their awareness about what the process entails, teaching them how to handle complicated matters such as fundraising, but also training journalists on how to avoid patriarchal language when they cover women candidates and when they interview women candidates. So basically, those are my main points for today. As I mentioned, I'm really sorry that I'm not able to join you in person. I hope you have very fruitful discussions. I am really going to miss the question and answer session. And I look forward to receiving some questions that I will respond to as promised in writing. Thank you.